In 1868, Japanese immigrants mass migrated to the west coast of the United States. Much like most immigrants, the Japanese faced racism as they competed for jobs. In 1940, Issei, the first-generation Japanese immigrants, controlled 2% of the total farmland in California. As a result, they become a target of envy. On a regional level, people gather in anti-alien associations and swear to never buy or sell to Japanese Americans. They are also constantly pushing out legislations to revoke Japanese immigrants of their citizenship rights. Such legislations include various versions of the Alien Land Act, which prevent immigrants from owning land or prohibiting them from becoming citizens in the first place. The Japanese and other immigrants faced racism on the national level as well. The Asiatic Exclusion League, AEL, was an organization that focused on preventing Japanese immigrants from achieving success in North America. The league lobbied on the national level and supported anti-alien congressmen such as Albert Johnson, known for passing the Immigration Act of 1924, and Congressman E.A. Hayes of California, who often claimed that Japanese immigration was an evil influence. The league pressured President Theodore Roosevelt to sign the Gentleman's Agreement, which prohibited Japanese immigrants from coming to the United States. The AEL's propaganda also pushed U.S. Congress to pass the Naturalization Act of 1870, under which only white immigrants can become citizens.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special news bulletin. The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, by air, President Roosevelt has just announced. The attack also was made on all naval and military activities on the principal island of Oahu.
After Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor, Congress declares war on Japan. As a response to the unfounded fear of espionage and sabotage propagated by anti-immigrant associations, President Roosevelt signed the Executive Order 9066, which calls for all persons of Japanese descent to be confined in camps. Along the way, families were forced to live in cramped, military-styled housing and were later transferred to camps. In the camps, the Japanese Americans were fortunate enough to find jobs, but the pay rates were lower than what they could earn outside. Throughout the whole ordeal, Japanese Americans lost majority of their property to anyone who took advantage of their crisis. Knowing that their property will only be seized if left alone, Japanese Americans sold their property for abnormally cheap prices. One family had to sell their pickup truck for $25. Some tried to rent their homes, but only returned to find their storages raided while their homes were left in terrible conditions.
We saw all these people behind the fence, looking out, hanging onto the wire, and looking out because they were anxious to know who was coming in. But I will never forget the shocking feeling that human beings were behind this fence like animals crying. And we were also going to lose our freedom and walk inside of that gate and find ourselves cooped up there. Where the gates were shut, we knew that we had lost something that was very precious, that we were no longer free.
The Japanese felt wronged by the accusations. They resisted to the order by violating curfews and refusing to relocate. Many Japanese Americans resisted through court. The most famous example of such court cases was Korematsu versus United States. Fred Korematsu was a Nisei, or American-born Japanese. When Korematsu defied the government's relocation orders by staying in his home in San Leandro, California, Korematsu was arrested and tried. Korematsu's conviction was upheld by the court despite the conviction being unconstitutional. The argument made by Justice Hugo Black, one of the majority who supported Korematsu's conviction, claimed that although their decision curtails the right of a single radical group, pressing public necessities may sometimes justify the existence of such restrictions.
I started working on this case when I was 1 or 2 years fresh out of law school. Many people would call this the case of a lifetime. And to have that, quote, case of a lifetime as soon as you get out of law school is really pretty amazing. It taught me so many things that have served me on a regular basis. It certainly taught me about how politics relates to the law and how inextricably linked political decisions are from legal decisions. It gave me a perspective on the law that I think I bring to my work constantly. It was a powerful lesson to see that this was not viewed as a Japanese-American issue. It was viewed as an American issue it was viewed as an issue for Jews, for blacks, for Hispanics, for any group that might suffer a similar fate or could suffer a similar fate. It resonated with people as a constitutional civil rights issue rather than a special interest issue.
After announcing the end of internment camps, a fiery debate started over the resettlement of the Japanese. People had differing opinions following the end of the internment camps. Various anti-Japanese groups formed in the West Coast. Members of these groups were mostly from organized labor groups, veterans organizations, and agricultural interests. They were threatened by competition with Japanese and Japanese Americans. In the early months of 1945, as the Japanese began to return, the controversy began to fade. The efforts of the anti-Japanese groups died down and were not effective. Although there was a lot of resentment towards the Japanese, there were many people who also sympathized with them and tried to help them, such as the Seattle Council of Churches. Also, the United Church Ministry provided services for the returning Japanese Americans by setting up programs to provide jobs, counseling, medical care, welfare, and recreational events to help them. The government began a publicity campaign on the heroism of Japanese American soldiers, which helped ease the public's mind of the Japanese. Throughout the 1950s, many Japanese Americans had problems with housing and employment discrimination. They were denied access to many recreational and retail services and were forced to restart their lives. Over time, however, they began to rebuild their lives.
They had a philosophy that was in some ways useful, in some ways not useful. They say shigata ga nai. It can't be helped. We have to do it. And they did endure. And their culture told them that they should resemble the bamboo, which will bend in the wind but not break, where a larger tree will go down in a storm, the bamboo will just bend and return. So this was part of Japanese and Japanese American culture. So largely they made the best of it. Some people had their lives destroyed. Some people were never able to recover what they had lost. Most Japanese Americans were extremely resilient and managed to overcome their situations and get something positive out of it.
Japanese American Citizens League, the largest Asian American civil rights organization in the United States, was founded in 1929. In 1978, JACL launched a campaign for redress calling for restitution of $25,000 per internee, an apology by Congress acknowledging the wrong, and funds to establish an educational trust fund. This became known as the redress movement. Redress is defined as the setting right of what is wrong. In 1980, JACL and the Japanese American community celebrated the successful passage of a bill to create the Commission on Wartime Relocation and Internment of Civilians, CWRIC. In June 1983, the CWRIC recommended as remedies an apology by Congress and the President, monetary compensation of $20,000 to each surviving victim of the Japanese internment, instituted in 1942, and the creation of an educational trust fund. The Japanese American members of Congress, Senator Daniel Inouye, Senator Spark Matsunaga, Representative Norman Mineta, and Representative Robert Matsui, drafted legislation seeking $1.2 billion to provide for the individual compensation and the trust fund. The opponents of the redress legislation felt it was inappropriate for one generation to be punished for the mistakes of the previous. They also felt that $20,000 was too big of a sum. Appropriating $1.2 billion was fiscally irresponsible. Despite the opposition, on August 10, 1988, President Ronald Reagan signed a bill authorizing redress payments for Japanese Americans.
The perseverance of the Japanese Americans and their ability to rebuild their lives during these times of hardships are truly symbols of inspiration for generations to come.